Okay. Where are we? Input field. Alright, so let me just start this series.
That reminds me, that prop yesterday, but it was a bit, it's confusing, because I remember you were passing props at first, it was not working. Then all of a
Yeah,
sudden,
all that changed was that I put these curly braces around it. So I think if you're passing anything, just put it in curly braces. Save yourself all that stress.
Giyu,
Yeah.
if we are free, maybe you can even, after a day's work, you can just drop some assignments, because so that, for example, now this stuff we did yesterday, now we don't even know whether we can replicate it still.
Oh, there's really no time for assignments because
Yeah, that's what I just said. If we are free, okay, no
the guy has
problem.
already. He's supposed to have given me the link by now.
Yeah, that yesterday
sign
stuff,
off.
it was not Asabene you used, but
Different places actually. The thing is, Asabene focused on class components. It was until later that he went to hooks, because you see, aside from props and conditional rendering, those ones are kind of small things. State is practically the be all and the whole of React. Almost everything goes towards state. And at first, function components didn't use state. It was later on that it was introduced with hooks. So at that beginning time in Dai's Asabene's system, he kept talking of class components because when he entered state, it was just class components. So from there, you just be seeing until later you now enter hooks. So I was impatient. I jumped it and left to look for where I would just see function components with state. Okay, so personal info. So now we see this input fields. This is clearly named. You can just write whatever you want and it goes. Jump to the next one. Let's see, do this. Okay. Supposed to. Okay, no error. And this one is password. So we see that this is working, right? Hide, show, but it's the same. It's the same component, the same input fields. All that is changed is just the info that is passed in. Just a little bit of tweaking here and there, and you can have different looking input fields. It's kind of like, have we used all these free JS resources? Like maybe that one for creating slideshows, Swiper.js or Slider.js, one of those kinds of things. If you've used them before, you'll see that things are kind of similar. You just pass in some kind of stuff like this in their, what do they call that thing? Their activation scripts. Maybe here is true, here is 360 px, here is this one, that one, and you have different slides from someone else. So that's kind of how it is to React when you're creating components, with a wide range. Yeah.
Sorry, please let me ask. So this, for example, now this is toggle.
I'm going to clean them and then we'll do it again. I did it to test it. Yeah. Alright, so at the point we stopped yesterday, I think there was just is required. Yes, there was is required because we used it for conditional rendering. If it is required, then this thing should show. If it's not required, then the star will not show. So this was what I added. So I'll just take this. Okay. So you see any big changes that I'm making, it's mostly in here. In personal info, all I did was just to add one new one new proxy in the objects, in the input objects. But this one I didn't touch it. It's just the input I changed. This was where there were lots of changes. So I'm removing this until we find the reason why it came in there in the first place. And all these ones are going as well. This is going okay, no, not this. This one is going. Unchanged, required, value, all are going. So we have type, we have class name, we have placeholder. This was what we had yesterday. Okay, yeah, this label, I put it in a span so that I can adjust the size. You know, before the label was just here like this, so I put it in span so that I can change the size if I want. So we have, okay, this is supposed to be inside the label as well. Use states. Okay, this. Okay, let me remove it as well until we get there. Alright, so we have this looking just as it did yesterday. Alright, so the first thing that I will do is is to put that show. Okay, so first of all, let's put the show. That one is just tailwind and stuff. So the input is in a div and the div is relative. So we're going to create another div. So at the moment there is no padding or anything on this div, so that means that the dimensions of this div are exactly the same as this input, because the input itself also, okay, I see empty3. Let this one go away. The margin should be here instead. So this div is going to be exactly the same dimensions as the input, because you know, if you have a div and you don't give it dimensions, it will just take dimensions of whatever is inside it. Alright, so that's necessary for what we want to do. So this is relative. We're going to create an absolutely positioned div inside it. Class name absolute. Alright, so inside this absolutely positioned div, we're going to have a p tag. So let me just write show here. response name. Let's go with text XS. Text XS. Alright. So if we just check it now, we see that the show is going to be yeah, it's going to be okay. It's showing everywhere. Okay, so see, it's showing at the bottom left of every input. Alright, so first of all, let's get it to sit properly here, and what we'll do is to give this let's see, bottom will be 4 because we want it in the middle of the inputs, so that means 16px from the bottom is going to get us that. Let's see that. And then right rather. I hope you know how this thing works, absolute and relative positioning. Let me say 4 as well. That's not much. Let's see 4. Okay, but the text is big. It's not small like this. Did I write it wrong? Oh, I wrote that. Okay. So, in case you are wondering why it is like that, this input has padding of 1 rem up and down. You see, this PY4 is 16px, 1 rem up and down, right? So that means the bottom of that div is here, and if you go up 16px, the bottom will be at the middle. It will just be in line with this thing. So that's why I gave it bottom 4, because that shifts the bottom up by 16px. This one, well, I think that's how it looks. We might shift in a bit. Something like that. Okay, I think it's even smaller. So it's a bit smaller than this somehow. Yeah, so we might reduce that, but I think the space here is alright. So this is 12. Let's make it 10 instead. 10px. Crazy. I think it should just remain as it was. Okay, so now we have our first problem. The show is appearing everywhere. We only want it to show when it's a password input. Right? So we can do some conditional here and say okay, so whenever you want to do a conditional, inside, you always put it in this curly brace, because this curly brace is like, it recognizes whatever is in this curly brace as a variable. It's like in what do they call it, in template literals in JavaScript, where you do the dollar and curly braces, and anything inside is a variable. That's kind of how it is here. So here is just the curly braces. So I'm going to move this down. And here I'll say type is equal to password. Okay, and here I'll put the question mark, and here I'll put this and this. Okay, so if type is password, then it should okay, maybe this one too should also shift in, yeah. This one to shift in, right. Alright, so if type is password, display this. If it's not password, empty string. So let's see how that goes. Remember the type property. So this was the type, text, email, password. So if it's not password, we should not see show. We should not see that whole stuff. Okay, and we have that's solved. Now the next issue is that when you type in something, you click on show, nothing is happening. In the first place, we want this to become visible, and we want this to turn to hide. Okay, so normally in JavaScript you use DOM manipulation. You would say when you click on this, the type should change to text, and then when you click on show on hide again, the type should turn to password. That's normally how it is in JavaScript. But here we don't really have DOM manipulation. Most things happen with state. So we're going to have to create a state. State is just, well, I say, a variable that stores a particular condition of something inside this component. So the thing is, whenever any state changes, you can have multiple states inside the component. Whenever any state changes, the component re-renders. So because of that re-render, well, you see something different, or you may see something different depending on how you code it. So to use states, we would have to also import states, because when you say import React from React is the default export. So you can just like how you say import input fields from inputfield.jss, yeah, is the default exports. So you can just call it like that. But there may be other things in the page. Let's say we wrote something else and just said export this. For you to import it from somewhere else, you have to put it in this. So we'll say use states. So if you write use in here, you see all these things. These are all hooks. All this stuff normally would happen are things you can do on classes, but hooks were created to hook into that functionality with function components. So because of the presence of hooks, well, function components are basically taking over React because they are easier and more logical. It's easy to just see what's happening in a function component. As the way class components are kind of weird. So all these are normally stuff that you could probably get in classes without stress or too much stress. Anyhow, use states is the one we want. Maybe as you are reading up later, you might find out the uses of all the others. See, there are plenty, but use states. Okay, so now let's write this. So what do we call this value now? This is show height. Okay, let's call it visibility. Let visibility and set visibility equal to use state false. Okay, so you see how this kind of looks like this line 7 somehow looks similar to line 6 because we're also using the structuring. Whenever you say use state like this, it always returns an array with two things inside. The first thing is the state value. The second thing is a function that will help you change that state. So and then whatever you pass into this place, into this use states, becomes the initial value of the state here. So as you pass this in, if we console log visibility now, visibility is false. Perhaps you should try that. Set visibility and this annoying people. Okay, so false. You see 3 instances of false for the 3 variables. Alright, so that is visibility. So visibility is false, and normally you don't see what is written in here. Alright, so let's say if you click on this div, where is that div? Yeah, this div. If you click on this div, then you change visibility, right? So we'll add an event listener. Here we don't normally use those other type of event listeners. It's always this HTML type event listeners that we use. So on click, okay. So the best way to use it is to define a function outside. So let's call this function toggle visibility because that's what it's doing. So const toggle visibility is equal to that is equal to set visibility, and then, well, it won't be right to just write true. So what we'll do is not visibility. Not changes true to false and false to true. So if visibility at any point is true, let's add something. So yeah, if visibility at any point is true, this would set it to false. If it's false, it would set it to true. So let's console log visibility, and then here we'll just pass in toggle visibility, just like that. Just write toggle. You don't put this, just like that. So why we don't do that is because I think it's to prevent unnecessary function calls. I think that's how they describe it. To prevent so it only calls when it is necessary. Okay, I think. Alright. So if you click on this, false, true, false, true. So you can see it changing. Visibility is just anytime you click on it, it changes. So let's add cursor pointer. It was annoying clicking on it with normal cursor pointer. Okay. All right. So now, you see, just doing that was not enough. To write something, you click show. Show visibility, the value is changing, but it's not affecting anything yet. So we have to tie this value in here to whatever visibility is. At least once we change that, then we'll now work on changing the type if it's password. Okay. So let's put this and say visibility show, right? Visibility true means that it's visible, so we should actually want it to hide instead. So yeah, if visibility is true, then it should show hide. Yeah, so that when you click hide, the visibility will now become false. Right, so this is how it should be. So first of all, we see this. All right, it becomes hide. It becomes true hide. All right. So now passwords, changing the type to password. This is type. So we can now see type is equal to visibility. It's just something similar. If visibility is true, that means it is type text at the moment. So yeah, so it should be text. And if visibility is false, it should be password. What's wrong here? How would you expect that? Type. I don't get this. all I do. Okay. All right. So we're getting a very weird issue now. Because of this, all of them are showing. Okay. And remember that we said, what do they call it? This should only show if type is password. So the moment it stops becoming password, it's going to go away. So we have to add, it was because of this that I had to add a second this thing. And that one is going to be like a kind of, catch. So I what did I call it, sir? Password visibility toggle. Is that what I called it? Let's call it that. Alright. So with this now, we can now add something like, if password visibility toggle, then we can now start messing around with this. So instead of saying that this thing should show if type is password, that whole show and hide stuff, instead of saying it should show if type is password, we'll now change it to show if password visibility toggle is true. So the moment you put password visibility toggle, there's going to be a hide and show. Alright, so so just because it's a true or false something, it's going to be either true or false. So this is like true, this should happen, false, this should happen. So if it's true, then this should show, and then this one is now about visibility. So back to here. Yeah, this is fine. This looks fine. So let's see. Okay, we've not added the values. So we need to add this value to all three. It's now something that we have to add to all inputs. Alright, so comma, and that, let's see, false. But this last guy is going to be true. Alright, so we have show. You click on it, you get the show hide stuff, and let's see whether it works. Yeah, so that is working. Alright, so I think that's about that for states. But now, normally in JS, when you are trying to submit an input later on, you get the value. You say maybe this document dot gets element by ID, you call this thing and say dot value. But here there's no DOM manipulation. So how do you get the value from here? React evolved they thought in a very different way, and they decided, instead of getting the value after the fact, like somebody types something and you later get the value from what the person has typed. We decided that no, instead, the thing that is showing here should come from the value itself. So the value is always stored with React, as in what you see on the browser becomes what is showing from React. Like, it's React that is supplying what you are seeing on the browser. So that means at any point in time, React always has the value of every input. So you won't have a problem of because there's no DOM manipulation, you can't get the value. So again, that problem is solved with state. So we create another state. Technically you can join states together, but it's a bit risky, so let's just carry on with, if you want another state, you create another state variable instead of lumping everything together. It's easy to make a mistake and lose everything. So let's create another one called value and set value. So you see, the thing you write here is up to you to set it. Like, it's not a fixed something. So instead of doing this, you can choose to say use states and then you now put this 0 or 1, but you see that does not make sense. You get lost. Here now is 0 or 1, this other place is 0 or 1, so you have to assign variables to it so you keep track of which is which, because this is the same use state, this one is the same use state. How do you tell, if you just said use state 0, how do you tell which one exactly you are changing? So that's why we use these to alright, value, set value, and now in our inputs we are going to say their value is equal to value. So whatever this value is what this value is. And because of that, if we just do this like this, okay, set value, because we didn't use set value. Alright, if we just do it like this, you will see that, you see already, the warning is saying we provided a value prop to a form field without an unchanged handler. So that will mean that no matter what you type in here, I don't know if you're hearing the typing sounds, nothing is changing, because it's taking its value from React, and the React value is not changing as we're typing anything. So because of that, we have to put an unchanged handler. If you've used event listeners on inputs in normal JavaScript, you might want to complain and say it should have been on input, because on change, actually in JavaScript, in normal JavaScript, it actually changes when you come out of the inputs. Like, you're typing, nothing is going to, it's not going to record, it's not going to fire the event until you leave, you click outside that that input, then it's now fire and record the value. But in in React, on change works just like on input in normal JavaScript. So that means the moment anything changes, you press something, you paste something, you delete, cut, it fires. So it records every single change. So we have to write an onChange event. So onChange, see, all these are plenty events that you can do. So if you are looking for any event listener you want to do, just browse, make sure you put the keyword React, because there are slight differences between the event listeners in normal JavaScript and in React. So you can just say how do you do this particular kind of thing in React. You will find an answer online. So on change, we are going to call this handle change. Okay, we've not created it yet, so it's still showing like this. So const handle change e. Alright, so let's say target is equal to e dot targets. Are we cool with this e? E is just event. It's saying e is whatever triggered the event. Because you click on this particular input, handle change was triggered. So e is going to record that element that triggered that input, that triggered that function. So e is basically singling it to this particular input. Alright. So e dot target holds, will I say, this input object. Okay, so we can now get value from it or something, or do something to it. Okay. So what we're going to do instead is set value to, this is a function, so just like we did here. So instead we're going to call it target dot value. Alright, so once anything makes this onChange event fire, it will set the value of this input to value, and it will, and because it sets it to value, the value of the input will actually change. So it's like a back and forth kind of thing, but we are going to see the importance. What's the error? Target is, oh, I didn't say let. Alright. Alright, so now we can write something actually. But how do you really tell, or how do you confirm that this is actually storing the value? Let's do a little test. So under this input, or no, in fact, under the label entirely, under here, we're going to add a p tag. Let's say text xs, and we're going to give it the value of value. So let's see how that goes. You can already see it, but let's see it happening live. As I write TYI, so you see whatever you're writing is storing into that value object. So later on, you can easily, get the values of each stuff. Although, well, because of this, for this thing, well, we'll get to that, I think, when we actually have to submit something to form. Okay, well, I think we're pretty much done with what I had in mind for today. At least we've seen states, we've seen functions like event listener functions or event handler functions in functional components. We've seen conditional rendering, just a mix of all those things. So I believe this can help us when we actually start building stuff.
So this before let me ask first.
Yeah.
I've been hearing you talk about state react, and you talked about class initially. Then you said because of that you had to skip into states. That state had state is the modern way of using it.
Function
Component,
yeah.
Okay, function what? Say that again.
Function components.
Okay, function components.
Yes.
So that's what we started with before skipping or before going to states. Well, what's basically the difference now in a layman English?
You see how this is. This. What does this look like?
That looks like a JavaScript assigning a function. Sorry,
yes,
function arrow function.
Arrow function. Yeah, that's it. So look at this one. What does this one look like?
Okay, this looks like Let me see.
This is a class.
Class, yes.
You see, classes are, if you are not very grounded in JavaScript, you might not know of classes. They are a bit less talked about. Normally, functions are the loud things everybody hears. It's not every time that you have a need to create a class. Classes are just stuff you use to create objects. See, the beauty of classes is if you have a need to create a particular type of object often, then you can create a class that will be like a constructor of that object. Just is kind of similar to how we did this whole component idea, where we've created this function so that we can create a bunch of similar stuff, right? That's how classes are in JavaScript. You want to create a bunch of similar objects at any point in time. You create a class so that you can just pass in variables into the class, just like this. You just pass them into the class, and then you create a new object that is different from another object here, but it follows the same pattern, something like that. Like you might have seen new dates if you've ever worked with dates in JavaScript. See where they write all kind of small here, new date, maybe new regex, new array, new this, new that. Those are all class constructors. Like they are classes that are used to construct objects. So that array was written in normal JavaScript as a class. Date is written as a class. The other one, regex, is a class. So by writing new something and passing in some variable into the brackets, you can create an object. So that's how classes are. And you see how the definition of class kind of rhymes with what components are all about. So classes, I guess they were the main idea for components at first, until functions decided to come and take everything over.
This React came with a lot of weird things.
Sure, there are a lot of weird things, but the thing is, they didn't come out from nowhere. They came out from somewhere. That's why it's highly advised that you learn a bit about JavaScript quite well before you enter React. If you see that this Asabenes, this thing, 30 days of React, if you go to the day 1, day 2, what he did there was introduction. Okay, no, you see the first thing is JavaScript refresher. Where is that JavaScript refresher? So, let's go to day 1. See long stuff. See how long this thing is. So this is, let's look at itself. This adding JavaScript, these ones are not variables. You need to know variables, data types, arrays, creating empty arrays, manipulating arrays, because there will be a time where you might need to pass in variables as an array, and you have to play around with it. So all kinds of array methods, know them. Conditionals, you've already seen the use just today, self. If else, switch, if, loops. Well, you can also imagine that one is mostly for arrays, or some other kind of reason. Scope, objects. We're already dealing with objects where we are right now as the variable. Object methods, functions. Of course, if you are going to be writing function components, then you need to know about functions. Higher order functions, these are like callback functions. This is basically what we're doing. Okay, we've not really started doing it yet. Maybe if we start using dispatch. Yeah, there's one in a reducer. If we use reducer instead of use state, that'll be a callback because we pass in a function into this thing. The structuring and spreading, we are clearly seeing that one in our props and in the use state. Rest or spread operator, okay, we've not seen that yet, although we could have seen that, Sha. These are array methods, Sha. So helpful. You see classes here. So functions, classes, these are two very strong things that you have. Although class now at the moment you don't necessarily need to know them because you can just use functions and do everything you want. But that was it. So I think if you know all these things that are here, if you know them well, you won't have much issues with React. All right, so that is that. Okay, so any other questions, something like that? Nothing. All right. So
not really from me. Not really from me.
So I guess we call it a day then.